What's up, y'all? How you doing? Welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to be talking about something that just really sticks in my craw when it comes to especially modern day gun legislation. You hear this argument from a lot of politicians, I say that with the least amount of respect, I assure you, who keep talking about common sense gun control. Oh, I want to regulate this, I want to ban that, I want to do this or that, that or whatever, to constitutionally protected rights that are very clearly and concisely stated in the document that supposedly governs these United States. And one of the biggest things, as I said, that just really ticks me off when it comes to this particular argument is the old weapon of war fallacy. And you hear this all the time. I have heard Bobo Biden say this I don't know how many times since he got into office, and it's a lie every single time. He keeps saying that the AR-15, aka weapon of war, have no place on our streets. Well, today I'm gonna set the record straight, or at least the best way that I can. The AR-15 is not a weapon of war. Yes, it bears a striking resemblance to the M4, which is used by, well, at least for now, I believe they just chose a new standard issue rifle, but at least for the time being, is the standard issue weapon for the United States military. That is the M4, M16, or M16A4, depending on what your background is that platform. The M16 is far different from the AR-15. Yes, they look the same. Yes, they operate the same. Yes, the manual of arms is identical. But the guns themselves are very different. The differences mainly are the AR-15 is a semi-auto only civilian sporting rifle, or as I like to call it, a civilian tactical rifle. The M4, M16 platform is a select fire assault rifle. Yes, I use the term. I hate using it. It was coined by frickin' Adolf Hitler back in World War II. It was originally referring to the MP44, but that is the proper word. That is the proper nomenclature for a rifle that is meant for actual line infantry use and has a select fire mechanism. Now, select fire, for those who do not know, an AR-15 has a safety right here. Right now it's on safe. Right now it's on semi. If this thing were actually loaded and I pulled this trigger, bang, that would fire one round, count them one, per function of the trigger. Now if I were to let off this trigger, and of course it's not going to do it right now because there's obviously no ammo in this magazine, the gun is cold, but if I were firing live ammunition right now, the trigger would reset and I could pull the trigger once more in order to keep on firing. A select fire weapon, as you can see, I can't do it on this one because it doesn't have select fire. It is not a weapon of war. On a military rifle, this would go to a third position, which is either fully automatic or burst fire. That's where if I were to pull this trigger and hold it down, under fully automatic fire, that means it just goes movie style, you know? Or, more common than not, in today's military, it's a 3-round burst where instead of just going full battle rattle, just you pull that trigger on burst mode, it goes bam. Because that is actually much more useful than full automatic fire, but I digress on that. I'll touch on that later in a later video. The AR-15 actually was not originally designed to be a military rifle before it was transformed into the M16. Actually, when this first came out, Eugene Stoner, the man who invented the M16 AR platform, was designing it specifically for civilian use. He actually wanted his AR-10 or AR-18 designs to be adopted by the US military. This was not designed in any way for military use. What happened was, back in the day, the US Army decided to pass up on the AR-10 and the AR-18, went with the M14, which, as we all know, crashed and burned horribly, but it was still a good rifle, it just didn't live up to the standards and needs of the military at that time. What happened was the Air Force saw civilians using these, decided, I like that. That's pretty neat. Can we try those? So the Air Force bought a couple. The Army saw that, decided, hey, we really like that, but let's make some tweaks. After the Army made their tweaks and they adopted it, well, then the Marine Corps liked it. And, c'est la vie, everything came to fruition, and now it's the standard weapon for, or the M16 rather, not the AR-15, is the standard weapon for the US military. So this was never intended to be a military weapon. This is a civilian-only weapon that was adopted by the US military in a different form with several modifications to it, mainly being barrel is shorter. Civilians have to have a 16-inch barrel unless you have special paperwork and an NFA tax stamp from that illegal and unconstitutional organization known as the ATF, or as Biden likes to call it the AFT. To get any barrel shorter than that, you have to pay a $200 tax stamp, file paperwork with the National Firearms or through the National Firearms Act through the ATF. Then it's registered. They'll know when you have it. Blah 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 blah. I'm not going to get into that can of worms. The military uses a 14.5-inch barrel, so it's about this much shorter. Also, the military uses heavier barrels. They have different barrel profiles. They have, up to now anyway, they've had different accessory rails. They've had, again, a select fire system in the firearm itself, making it fully automatic or burst fire, which we civilians can't have, again, without a tax stamp through the ATF. Grips are different. Mags are different. And the military has a lot better optics than most of us civilians can afford. I wish I could afford an ACOG. I would have one on every single one of my guns. The uses are different. The configurations are different. Now, yes, you can build an AR-15 up to basically anything you want. I have built several. They are really fun to tinker with. I want to get in and build some more if things ever go back down in price. But the AR-15 itself is not a weapon of war. I do not care what anybody says. They're lying to you if they try to say that. But let's just say, let's try to approach it from their standpoint. Oh, well, it looks just like a weapon that the military uses. Oh, it's the weapon the military uses, it's designed from the AR-15, so that makes it a weapon of war. Okay, you want to go down that rabbit hole? So what you're saying is any weapon that has ever been used in as a weapon of war during wartime, or is directly designed from or borrows from a former weapon of war, is a weapon of war, and therefore civilians can't have it? Okay, let's talk about that. 1911-45, 50 state legal. This baby holds 7 or 8 rounds in a standard capacity magazine. It was standard issue for the United States Army from 1911 until 1986, I believe, when the Beretta M95 or M9 took over. Please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I probably am. One of the longest serving handguns in U.S. military use in U.S. history. Again, this is 50 state legal as far as I'm aware. It holds less than 10 rounds, it is appropriate weight, it is full size, so it's not very concealable, although big guys like me can pull it off. Weapon of war. Another standard issue U.S. sidearm. This is a Ruger Nu Vaquero. It is a copy of the Colt 1873 Single Action Army. In fact, the exact same configuration, 7.5-inch barrel. They called this the cavalry model. This was the standard, or not this exact model, but this is derived from the standard issue handgun for the United States military from 1875 until 1898, when it was replaced by the Colt New Service 38 Special, which actually was later replaced by this again, even going into World War I, because 38s just weren't cutting it in battlefields such as Mexico, the Philippines, other places where our boys were serving, and 38 just wasn't up to snuff. It just wasn't doing what they wanted it to do. But again, former standard issue handgun for the United States military. Single action revolver, meaning right now I can pull this trigger all day long. Nothing's going to happen. You have to manually cock this hammer in order for it to go into battery. Pull the trigger, bam, you just fired 1 round. Oh, you want to shoot again. You have to cock that hammer every time. To reload this guy, you have to open the loading gate. On the original Colts, you had to put it on half cock, but Rugers don't have that. Eject all 6 rounds, 1 at a time. Then reload all 6 rounds, 1 at a time. Close that loading gate. Cock the hammer. Now you're back in action. This served through the Indian Wars, through the Philippine Insurrection, through the punitive expedition into Mexico. Weapon of war. Also one from that same time period. Winchester, lever action 1892. Now, this is a Rossi reproduction, but it is descended from the Winchester 1892. And previous to this model, there was the 1873, the gun that won the West. Before that, there was the 1866 model. Before that, there was the 1860 Henry, which actually came out during the Civil War. Won very much repute with Union forces serving in the Civil War. In fact, they called it that damn Yankee rifle you could load on Sunday and shoot all week long, because that baby held 16 rounds. This one only holds 12. But the Henry actually held 16 rounds, and it was the first really functional repeater that the U.S. military ever used. Whereas before, so you're going to fire at that guy over there. Bang! If it's a muzzleloader, now I have to replace the cap, pour in the powder, pour in the ball, stuff it down with a ramrod. A good soldier could get off 3 aimed shots in 1 minute if you were lucky. Then along comes the lever action. Boom, 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 boom. Boom! As fast as you can work this lever, you can put rounds downrange. Variations of this were used by not only American settlers and the Native Americans, but also by some forces of the U.S. military. These were standard issue for both the Russian and Turkish militaries for quite a while. In fact, which made it kind of awkward because the Russians and Turks actually fought a war right after both sides adopted this rifle. So Winchester was really busy keeping both sides on both sides of a war supplied and not really getting into political hot water while doing it. Not only that, several other nations really loved the Winchesters. Civilians have been using guns like this since they came out. In Africa, these were very common. In South America, very common. In Europe and in the Middle East, extremely common. Of course, the United States, everybody had one of these. This was the AR-15 of its day. Weapon of war. Something a little more recent. Knocking stuff over here. But something a little more recent. Winchester Model 70 30-06. This one has a special place in my heart. This is actually my dad's old deer rifle that he handed down to me after he passed away. My dad killed more deer with this thing than I will ever see in all my days, but I digress. This exact model was used by the United States military, particularly the Marine Corps, as a sniper rifle. This served through the 70s into the 80s, basically until it was replaced by the M70 or the Model 700 made by Remington, which is basically a carbon copy of this with a few improvements. And actually, some variations of it are still used today. Again, the M70, the Remington 700. This is the old Model 70 again. Before this, the bolt action that is used on this rifle and practically every bolt action rifle made since the 40s is a Mauser action. The bolt and bolt head are taken from the design of the Mauser Model 1898, which was the standard issue rifle for the German Wehrmacht and the rest of the German army during World War I and World War II. Variations of that bolt were used by the Russians, the Turks, the Egyptians, the Norwegians, the Poles. I believe the British had to make a copy of it. The United States Army made a copy of it with the 1903 Springfield. Actually had to pay royalties to Mauser through both world wars. Before that, you had a different bolt action called the Krag-Jorgensen. Very similar to the Mauser. I don't think the bolt design was directly taken from it, but you get where I'm going here. Exact model. Used by the United States Army and Marine Corps, basically military in general, as a sniper rifle. Carlos Hathcock used one of these very, very prominently. He's called the White Feather if you want to look him up. Weapon of war. And let's not forget some of the more ubiquitous ones, like, I don't know, pump-action shotgun. You know, that probably the most common gun in the United States, aside from the AR-15 these days. Everybody's got one in their closet, shoved in the corner. I take one for turkey hunting every year, dove hunting, sport clay shooting, pheasant hunting, any kind of waterfowl hunting. Again, one of the most common weapons in use in the United States today. Any kind of or pump-action 12-gauge, rather. Weapon of war. It was used in World War I and World War II, through Vietnam. They're still using them as the Benelli M4 is a semi-automatic. But they're still in service through basically every military in the world. Pump-action 12-gauge. Weapon of war. Do you see where I'm going with this, folks? Calling something a weapon of war, or even worse, an assault weapon. Okay, quick aside. Assault weapon is not a designation. An assault weapon could be an AR-15. An assault weapon could be a hammer. An assault weapon could be my pocket knife. An assault weapon is a weapon used during an assault. It is not a noun. Well, I guess, getting a little flustered here. An assault weapon does not mean what politicians want you to think it means. An assault rifle is a military rifle with select fire capability used in actual military assaults. An assault weapon is a made-up political term meant to demonize any weapon that they want to get rid of at this particular point in time. It does not apply to any actual firearm out there, but they want you to think it does because they want an excuse to ban it. Now, let's say they do succeed in taking away the AR-15. That won't solve anybody's problems. It will not solve a damn thing. You look back at the assault weapons ban of 1994, which sunsetted in 2004, when, thank the gods above, allowed us civilians to actually get our hands on our beloved AR-15s once again because Clinton was a dumbass. That did absolutely nothing. Count 'em, nothing. Zip. Nada. Zippo. Zero. Negative. Had absolutely no impact on violent crime in the United States. And in fact, Since the sunset of the assault weapons ban in 2004, violent crime has gone down. It only experienced a spike during 2020 and the BLM riots when murder rates started to skyrocket, and they have been ever since because police departments were shut down, because government authorities were told to stand down and allow them room to riot. Exact wording. It's because guns are now being demonized. There's a push to disarm Americans. There is a social enforcement that if you dare to stand up and defend yourself, a la the McCloskeys in St. Louis, if you dare to pick up a weapon and use it for its intended purpose, which is to defend yourself, your home, your family, your loved ones, your property, to defend what you love from someone who is coming to take it, you will be destroyed. You will be eviscerated. You will be crucified in the media. Now, if you go out, put on a black mask, and start, beating random people to death and burning buildings down in the name of name that cause, you'll probably be championed. You'll be bailed out by the vice president. People will get on TV, literally drop to their knees and say, "Oh, what a good job you're doing." If you don't see what's happening, folks, you need to wake up. You need to do some research. And I'm trying to end this video on a positive note. This just gets me so... My Irish temper starts coming through on these certain subjects, folks. So, end of rant. In closing, there's no such thing as an assault weapon. Weapons of war are literally just weapons. You go back far enough, everything we now consider a weapon has been used as a weapon of war at one point or another. The kitchen knife and the knives you use in your kitchen can be called a weapon of war because they are descended from the knives that were used during wartime. The axe you use to chop wood, that is descended from the weapons that our ancestors used to go out and raid villages. There is no such thing as an assault weapon. Weapon of war is a fallacy. Do not let them talk you out of your rights, folks. Government does not give you the right to bear arms. Every person on this planet has it. We are just the only country that enshrined it in our ruling documents. That's all I got for you today. Y'all stay armed, stay savage, and stay frosty, my friends.